My name is Clara, I'm 34 years old, and my parents ordered me to forgive my own sister and my cheating ex-husband, 5 years after they blew up my world. Before I tell you about the absolute ruin that one phone call unleashed, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. It all started on a Saturday morning. The kind of quiet, peaceful Saturday that I had fought for years to reclaim. I was sitting at my kitchen table in my small Austin apartment, sunlight streaming through the window, nursing a cup of coffee that was just the right temperature. For the first time in a long time, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt like peace. Then my phone buzzed. The screen lit up with two words that made my stomach clench: home calling. I stared at it, my heart starting a low, heavy drumbeat against my ribs. I hadn't spoken to my parents in 3 months, not since my birthday when they'd sent a generic card with a $20 bill inside, like I was still a teenager. Our conversations had become minefields of unspoken words and buried resentment. I knew I should just let it go to voicemail, but some foolish, lingering part of me, the part that still wanted a mother and a father, made me swipe to answer. "Hello?" I said, my voice carefully neutral. "Clara, sweetheart. I'm so glad I caught you." It was my mother, her voice syrupy sweet in that way that always meant trouble. It was the voice she used right before she was about to ask for something she knew I wouldn't want to give. "How are you, darling?" "I'm fine, Mom. Is everything okay?" I cut straight to the point. I didn't have the energy for small talk. There was a slight pause. "Well, yes, everything is wonderful. We have the most fantastic news, and we wanted you to be the first to know." I heard my father murmur something in the background. She continued, her voice practically bubbling over. "Your sister, Chloe, is pregnant." The coffee cup felt heavy in my hand. Pregnant. Of course. My sister, my baby sister, who was now 23, was pregnant. And the man who had gotten her pregnant was my ex-husband, Mark. The pain was instant, a familiar, cold spike driving straight into my chest. I said nothing. "Clara? Are you there?" my mother pressed, her sweet tone turning impatient. "I'm here," I managed, the words tasting like ash. "That's news." "It's more than news, it's a blessing," she chirped. "The first grandchild. Your father and I are just over the moon. Which is why I'm calling. We're throwing a baby shower for her in a few weeks, a big family get-together, and we need you to be here. It's time, Clara. It's time to let bygones be bygones and bring this family back together." My blood ran cold. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It felt like a punch to the gut, knocking all the air out of my lungs. "You want me to come to a party? For them?" "Don't be so dramatic," she snapped, the sweetness gone, replaced by steel. "It's been 5 years. He's her husband now. This baby is your nephew or niece. This is about family. You know your father and I want to keep the family and its inheritance together, not split between feuding sisters. It's time to grow up and put the past behind you. Put the past behind me." As if the past was a misplaced set of keys, and not a gaping wound they had all carved into my life. I felt a hot flash crawl up my neck. My hand was shaking. I thought about the thousands of dollars I'd spent on IVF treatments, the sterile doctors' offices, the crushing disappointment month after month, a private, lonely grief that my own mother was now using as a weapon against me. "I can't do that, Mom," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "You can, and you will," she said, her voice final. "We'll see you on the 15th. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't scream or cry. I just pressed the red icon on my screen, ending the call. The silence that rushed back in was deafening, heavier than before. How could they ask that of me? How could they, of all people, forget? To understand the rage that was boiling in my veins, to understand what I did next, you have to understand what my life was like 5 years ago. Before the betrayal. Before the fire that burned my entire world to the ground. 5 years ago, I had it all. At 29, I had a great job in marketing here in Austin, a beautiful house in a quiet suburb that my husband and I had bought together, and a future that looked as bright and endless as a Texas sky. That husband was Mark. He was charming, ambitious, and everyone loved him. I loved him so much it felt like a physical part of me. And I had my sister, Chloe. She was 11 years younger than me, and I adored her. When she got accepted to the university here, I didn't hesitate. I told my parents not to worry about dorms or apartments, she would live with us. I wanted to give her a soft place to land, to guide her through the city and college life. I helped her pick her classes, gave her money when she was short, and listened to all her boy troubles. To me, she wasn't just a sister, she was almost like my child. She and Mark got along great. He treated her like a kid sister, teasing her and helping her with her car. I thought we were the perfect little family. I was working hard back then, chasing a big promotion. It meant I had to travel a lot. I hated leaving, but the promotion meant a huge salary increase, enough to finally start the family we'd been talking about, maybe even set up a proper college fund for our future kids. I was in Chicago for a 3-day conference that ended up being a massive success. I closed the deal a day early. My boss told me to take the next day off, a reward for my hard work. I was ecstatic. Instead of telling Mark, I booked the first flight home the next morning, planning to surprise him. I remember the taxi ride from the airport, my heart thrumming with excitement. I remember walking up the driveway, a wide grin on my face, picturing the look on his face when I walked in. I turned my key in the lock, my mind already planning a celebratory dinner. I pushed the door open, ready to yell, "Surprise!" But the word died in my throat. The house was silent. Not empty silent. It was heavy. Still. Then my eyes landed on a pair of strappy red heels kicked off near the bottom of the stairs. They were flashy, expensive, I knew because I'd bought them for Chloe for her 19th birthday. My blood ran cold. And from upstairs, from the master bedroom, from the room my husband and I shared, I heard a sound. A soft, unmistakable giggle. My feet felt like lead as I moved toward the staircase. Each step was a conscious effort, my hand gripping the wooden banister so hard my knuckles turned white. The air was thick, charged with a secret I was about to uncover. All the tiny, insignificant details from the past few months suddenly clicked into place with horrifying clarity, the late-night texts Chloe would hide from me, the way Mark had been so distant, the excuses for why he couldn't join me on this trip. They weren't just details, they were clues. They were weapons they had been using against me all along. When I reached the top of the stairs, the giggling had stopped. There was only a low murmur of voices coming from behind our bedroom door, which was slightly ajar. My heart was a frantic bird beating against the cage of my ribs. I remember thinking, just turn around, Clara. Just walk out the front door and pretend you never came home. But I couldn't. I had to see. I had to know. I pushed the door open. The scene that greeted me is burned into my memory like a photograph. My sister, my 19-year-old sister Chloe, was sitting on the edge of my bed, wearing one of my silk robes. And Mark, my husband, was standing in front of her, wearing nothing but a towel around his waist, his hair still damp from a shower. He was smiling down at her, a tender, intimate smile I hadn't seen him direct at me in months. They weren't doing anything, not at that exact second. But they didn't have to be. The intimacy, the casual domesticity of the scene, was more damning than anything else. They both looked up as the door opened, their faces a mirror of shock. Mark's smile vanished, replaced by a pasty, slack-jawed horror. But Chloe's expression was the one that broke me. There was a flash of panic, yes, but underneath it, there was something else. A flicker of defiance. A hint of a smirk. She wasn't just guilty, she was proud. Clara, Mark stammered, taking a step toward me. This isn't what it looks like. The cliché was so pathetic it was almost laughable. I looked from his terrified face to my sister's cold one. I looked at the rumpled sheets on the bed I had made that morning. My voice, when it came out, was a stranger's. It was hollow and dead. "Get out," I said. "What?" Mark asked, confused. "Both of you," I said, my voice gaining a terrifying edge of calm. I pointed at Chloe. "Get your things. And get out of my house." I turned my dead eyes to Mark. "You have 10 minutes to pack a bag. The rest of your things will be on the lawn in trash bags by morning. We're done." He tried to argue, to explain, but I just stood there, a statue of ice, until he finally gave up. Chloe, to her credit, didn't say a word. She just stood up, dropped my robe to the floor without a shred of shame, and got dressed. As she walked past me out the door, she refused to meet my eyes. That night, as I sat alone in the echoing silence of the house that was no longer a home, the full scope of their betrayal began to settle in. It wasn't just the affair. It was worse. So much worse. My mind replayed a conversation from 2 months earlier. Mark had come to me with a business proposal. He'd always been an entrepreneur at heart, and this time, he said, it was the real deal. A tech startup with a guaranteed return. He had charts, projections, a slick PowerPoint presentation. He needed $50,000 in seed money. "Clara, this is it," he'd said, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "This is the one that sets us up for life. We could pay off the house, travel, you could quit your job if you wanted." I was cautious. $50,000 was almost everything I had. It was the money I'd been saving from my salary for years, the nest egg I'd built after my last big promotion. It was the money I had mentally earmarked for our future, for a down payment on a bigger house, for our first child's college fund. "I don't know, Mark," I'd hesitated. And that's when Chloe had chimed in. She'd been sitting on the couch, pretending to do her homework. "Oh, Clara, it sounds amazing," she'd said, looking up with wide, innocent eyes. "You should totally do it. You always say you should support Mark's dreams. This is your chance." They tag-teamed me. He'd lay out the logic, and she'd shore up the emotional side. He'd talk about financial freedom, and she'd talk about faith and partnership. Looking back, it was a masterful performance. I was a fly caught in a web I didn't even know had been spun around me. Against my better judgment, I agreed. I transferred the money from my personal savings account to his. The next day, he took Chloe out for a celebratory dinner, he said, to thank her for being so supportive. I stayed home to work. Now, sitting on the floor of my silent bedroom, the truth hit me with the force of a physical blow. There was no startup. There was no investment. There was just a thief with a charming smile, and his clever little accomplice. They hadn't just cheated on me. They had conspired against me. They had methodically dismantled my life, stolen my future, and done it with a smile on their faces, all while living under my roof and eating the food I bought. The affair was a betrayal of my heart. But the money, that was a betrayal of my trust, my intelligence, my very identity as a capable, independent woman. They hadn't just made me a fool in my own home, they had made me pay for the privilege. That was the wound that cut the deepest. It wasn't just a moment of weakness. It was a calculated, cold-blooded execution of the life I had worked so hard to build. The weeks that followed the discovery were a blur of sterile white rooms and hollow legal jargon. My lawyer, a brisk woman named Patricia with sharp eyes and an even sharper tongue, laid out the grim reality for me. The money was gone. Mark had drained the account and transferred it somewhere untraceable. Because we were married and I had willingly transferred the funds, she said, proving it was theft and not a shared marital asset gone bad would be a long, expensive, and likely fruitless battle. My advice, she'd said, tapping her pen on her legal pad. Focus on the divorce. A clean break. Cut your losses and run. Some things just aren't worth fighting for. Cut my losses. My loss was my entire life savings. My loss was the home I now had to sell because I couldn't afford the mortgage on my own. My loss was the future I had planned, the family I had dreamed of. But she was right. I didn't have the money or the fight left in me to pursue him. So, I agreed. I signed the papers. I walked away with my clothes, my car, and a gaping hole where my heart used to be. The financial devastation was brutal, but the social fallout was a special kind of hell. I had always thought Mark and I had a wide circle of friends. Turns out, they were his friends. The invitations stopped coming. My calls went unanswered. The first few times, I tried to rationalize it. They're busy. They don't want to take sides. But then I ran into an old colleague at the grocery store. She looked at me with such pity in her eyes. I heard about what happened, Clara, she'd said in a low voice. I want you to know that I never believed you were as unstable as they said. Unstable. The word hung in the air between us. It was the first clue I had that Mark and Chloe hadn't just left, they had scorched the earth behind them. They had stayed in Austin just long enough to spin a tale of a crazy, jealous, possessive wife who had driven her poor husband into the arms of her sweet, innocent sister. They painted me as the villain in my own tragedy. And people believed them. It was easier to believe a woman was crazy than to believe a charming man and a pretty young girl could be so cruel. So, I retreated. I cut myself off, built walls around my life, and learned to live with the loneliness. And that was my life for 5 years. A quiet, gray existence. Until that Saturday morning. Until that phone call from my mother. All that pain, all that loneliness, all that rage I had so carefully packed away, came rushing back the second I heard her say Chloe's name. The demand that I show up and celebrate the fruit of their betrayal felt like they were trying to tear open the old wounds and pour salt in them just for fun. After I hung up, I sat there for an hour, my coffee cold, my hands shaking. Then, a dark, cold resolve settled over me. They wanted me to be part of the family? Fine. It was time for a family reunion. My fingers moved with a life of their own. I went to my social media, a place I barely used anymore. I went to my blocked list, a long graveyard of names from my past life. And I found him. Mark. With a single, trembling tap, I unblocked him. His profile picture showed him and Chloe, smiling on a beach, her hand resting on a small, neat baby bump. They looked so happy. So disgustingly, performatively happy. A fire I thought had died long ago roared to life inside me. I opened a message window. I didn't think. I just typed. The words poured out of me, a torrent of poison I had held in for half a decade. I wrote, I hope you're happy. I hope you're both so happy with the life you built on the smoking ruins of mine. I want you to know that not a day goes by that I don't think about what you did. You didn't just take my husband and my sister, you took my future. You took my money. You took my friends. I hope that baby you're so proud of feels every ounce of the misery you've caused. I hope you lie awake at night and feel the ghost of what you did to me. I hate you both. And I will never, ever forgive you. My finger hovered over the send button for a split second. Then I pressed it. The moment the message status changed from sending to delivered, a wave of nausea washed over me. The rage evaporated, leaving behind a cold, sick dread. What had I just done? It wasn't the venom I directed at them that made me feel sick. They deserved that, and more. It was the line about the baby. That innocent child had done nothing. Wishing ill on an unborn baby, that wasn't who I was. Or, at least, it wasn't who I wanted to be. I stared at the screen, the message marked delivered. And in that moment, I felt a horrible mix of relief and guilt. I don't know if what I did was right or wrong, but the silence that followed was deafening. If you're still listening, please help me by liking this video and commenting the number 1 below, so I know that you've given me a like, and I'll understand that you're with me on this journey. Your support is a tremendous encouragement for me. Please comment the number 1 and continue listening to my story. The days after I sent that message were fraught with a strange, anxious energy. I half expected my phone to blow up with angry calls from my parents, relayed through Chloe. I expected a blistering, hateful reply from Mark. But there was nothing. Just a heavy, ringing silence. The message was marked seen, so I knew he'd read it. The lack of response was, in a way, more unnerving than an angry tirade would have been. It felt like I had thrown a rock into a dark lake and was just waiting for the monster underneath to surface. I tried to put it out of my mind. I threw myself into work. I organized my apartment. I did everything I could to reclaim that fragile piece his name alone had shattered. I told myself it was done. I had said my piece, drawn my line in the sand. It was a mistake, maybe, but it was over. Then, on Tuesday evening, 3 days after I sent the message, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. My heart leaped into my throat. I had a sick feeling I knew who it was. My hands were trembling slightly as I opened it. The message read, "Clara. It's Mark. We need to talk." My first instinct was pure, unadulterated rage. How dare he? After 5 years of silence, after destroying my life, he thought he could just text me like no time had passed? Like he had any right to my time, my energy, my attention? I didn't even consider replying. My thumb moved with ruthless efficiency. I tapped the number, selected block contact, and confirmed it without a second thought. Done. I felt a grim satisfaction as I put my phone down. Boundary set. Message sent. But the peace lasted less than an hour. My phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. This message was longer. "Clara, please don't block me. I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But I need you to listen. I got your message. There are things you don't know. Things you need to understand. Please, just give me 5 minutes to explain." A cold dread began to creep up my spine. This was different. This wasn't angry. It was desperate. What didn't I know? What could there possibly be to explain? That he was a lying, cheating thief? That my sister was a backstabbing monster? I felt like I understood the situation pretty clearly. This felt like a trap. A manipulation. A new way to hurt me. I held my finger over the block button again, but I hesitated. Curiosity is a dangerous thing. A small, treacherous part of my brain wanted to know what he would say. What pathetic excuse could he possibly concoct after all this time? I warred with myself for a full minute before my self-preservation instinct won out. I wasn't going to let him pull me back in. I blocked the second number. I put my phone on silent and tried to watch a movie, but I couldn't focus. My mind was racing. Every buzz of my phone, even for a work email, made me jump. I felt like I was being haunted, stalked by the ghosts of my past. He was refusing to stay buried. He was clawing his way out of the grave I had put him in 5 years ago. The next day, Wednesday, was quiet. No new numbers. No strange texts. I started to breathe a little easier. Maybe he'd finally gotten the message. Maybe my double-barreled blocking had finally convinced him to leave me alone. I allowed myself to hope that the ordeal was finally, truly over. That evening, I was cooking dinner when my phone buzzed one last time. A third number. This time, I didn't even feel angry. I just felt a profound sense of weariness. This man was like a weed, impossible to get rid of. I opened the text, ready to block it without even reading. But the words on the screen stopped me cold. It read, Clara, please. You don't understand what's really going on. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to tell you the truth. For your sake, not mine. I need to see you." His words were insidious. They were designed to plant a seed of doubt, to make me question the reality I had lived with for 5 years. For your sake, not mine. It was a classic manipulation tactic, framing his own selfish desires as an act of service to me. But despite knowing all that, a tiny, terrible sliver of doubt wedged its way into my heart. What if there was something I didn't know? What if my understanding of the past wasn't the full picture? The thought was terrifying. It threatened the very foundations of the life I had rebuilt. It was a rabbit hole I knew I shouldn't go down. My resolve hardened. No. I would not let him do this to me. I would not let him poison my present with his past. With a final, decisive tap, I blocked the third number. I felt a sense of finality. It was over. It had to be. For 2 days, there was silence. Blessed, wonderful silence. I started to believe it was really over. I had weathered the storm, held my ground, and he had finally retreated. The tension in my shoulders began to ease for the first time in a week. I felt like I could finally breathe again. I was wrong. So wrong. On Friday night, I was curled up on my couch, wrapped in a blanket, watching some mindless reality TV show. It was just after 8 p.m. Then, my security doorbell chimed on my phone. I glanced at the notification, expecting to see a package delivery or maybe a neighbor's cat. Instead, I saw his face. Mark. Standing on my doorstep. His face, distorted and pale in the fisheye lens of the camera, looked older, tired. The sight of him, physically there, just a few feet from me, sent a jolt of pure ice through my veins. My breath caught in my chest. This wasn't a text message I could block. This was real. He had flown from his small town in East Texas all the way to Austin. He was at my door. My mind raced. Should I call the police? Should I pretend I wasn't home? But he had already rung the bell. He knew I was here. Some primal, territorial instinct took over. This was my home. My sanctuary. He had no right to be here. A cold, hard anger replaced the fear. I was going to tell him to leave, to his face, once and for all. I walked to the door, my heart hammering against my ribs. I took a deep, steadying breath and pulled it open. He looked worse in person. There were dark circles under his eyes, and he looked like he hadn't slept in days. For a second, we just stood there, staring at each other across the threshold of 5 years of pain and silence. Then, he did something I never would have expected. His face crumpled. His eyes filled with tears. And he lunged forward and wrapped his arms around me in a hug. I stood there, frozen, my body rigid as a board as he sobbed into my shoulder. It was the most bizarre, surreal moment of my life. I didn't hug him back. My arms were pinned to my sides, my hands clenched into fists. He finally pulled away, his face wet with tears. "Clara," he choked out. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." And then he just walked past me. Into my apartment. As if he still lived there. The sheer audacity of it snapped me out of my shock. "What are you doing?" I demanded, shutting the door behind him. "Mark, you need to leave. Now." "I can't," he said, sinking onto my couch, and burying his face in his hands. "I can't leave until you hear me out. I had to come. I read your message, and I knew I had to come." My shock was quickly being replaced by a deep, simmering rage. This was all a performance. The tears, the dramatic flight, the pathetic breakdown. It was all a show, designed to make me feel sorry for him. I wasn't buying it. I have nothing to say to you, I said, my voice like ice. But I have to say it to you, he pleaded, looking up at me, his eyes red and puffy. These last 5 years, they've been a nightmare, Clara. I thought I was doing the right thing, I thought. I don't know what I thought. But being with her, it's not right. She's not you, Clara. She's just a kid. The words were meant to flatter me, to make me feel superior. All they did was make me feel sick. He was 40 years old, talking about my 23-year-old sister like she was a child he'd accidentally broken. Then the truth came out. This baby, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. I'm not ready. I feel trapped. It's all happening so fast, and all I can think about is you. About what we lost. What I threw away. And that's when it all clicked into place. The switch flipped in my brain. The emotional noise, the anger, the pain, the shock, it all just faded away. All that was left was a cold, sharp, diamond-hard clarity. This wasn't about love. This wasn't about regret for what he did to me. This was about fear. He was a coward, terrified of the responsibility he had created, and he was running back to me, his safety net, hoping I was stupid and lonely enough to catch him. In that moment, an idea bloomed in my mind, fully formed and ruthless. I needed proof. I needed to document this pathetic, manipulative display for my own protection. I pulled out my phone. My hands were perfectly steady. Hold on, Mark, I said, my voice softening just a fraction. That's my boss calling. I have to take this. It'll just be a second. I turned away from him, answered the phone to my own voicemail, and put on a little performance. Hi David, yes, I got the email. Let me just put you on speaker while I pull it up. One moment. I pressed the speaker button, which did nothing, then tapped the big red record button on my voice memo app. I placed the phone face down on the coffee table between us. Sorry about that, I said, sitting down in the armchair opposite him. My heart was pounding, but my voice was calm. He can wait. Go on. You were saying you feel trapped. He took the bait. He didn't even glance at the phone. He was too wrapped up in his own drama. And he talked. For the next 15 minutes, he spilled his guts. He talked about how Chloe was immature, how my parents pressured them to get married after she got pregnant, how he missed our life, our conversations, me. It was a masterclass in self-pity, and my phone captured every single, damning word. When he finally wound down, I stood up. The recording was saved. The proof was secured. The power in the room had shifted entirely. Are you done? I asked. He looked up, confused by my cold tone. Clara, I said, are you done? I repeated. Because I am. Get out of my house, Mark. Now. And if you ever contact me or show up here again, the next person you'll be talking to is a police officer. The look on his face was a picture. The pathetic, teary-eyed man was gone, replaced by a stunned, angry stranger. He had expected me to melt, to comfort him, to maybe even welcome him back. He had severely, fatally, misjudged me. He stood up, a dark look in his eyes, but he didn't say another word. He just turned and walked out the door. I locked it behind him, the deadbolt sliding home with a satisfying, final click. The moment the door clicked shut, the adrenaline that had been holding me together hit me like a tidal wave. My knees felt weak, and I had to grab the back of the armchair to steady myself. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the sheer, vibrating intensity of what had just happened. For a moment, I just stood there in the middle of my living room, my own breathing loud in the sudden silence. He was gone. He had been in my home, my safe space, and now he was gone. But this wasn't the time to fall apart. This was the time to act. I walked over to the coffee table and picked up my phone. My hands were still trembling slightly as I stopped the recording and saw the file saved to my voice memos. I opened it and listened to the first few seconds. His voice, pathetic and pleading, filled my apartment. It was clear. It was perfect. A cold, methodical purpose settled over me. There was no rage anymore, no pain. Just a clear, straight path forward. I knew exactly what I had to do. I walked to my small home office, sat down at my laptop, and plugged in my phone. I navigated to the voice memo app and dragged the file onto my desktop. I renamed it audio_confession.mp3. The words leapt stark and powerful against my screen. Next, I opened the app for my security doorbell. I scrolled back through the evening's events until I found the notification. There he was, his face clear as day, ringing my doorbell. I saved the 30-second video clip. I renamed that file to video_visitor.mp4. The evidence was compiled. 2 simple files that held the power to detonate the carefully constructed fantasy my family had been living in for the past 2 years. They had painted me as the crazy one, the bitter ex-wife who couldn't move on. But the truth was now sitting on my desktop, ready to be deployed. I opened my email. I started a new message. In the to field, I typed in my mother's email address. Then my father's. I paused for a second, then added Chloe's university email address too. I figured she deserved to be on the CC line. For the subject line, I typed, "Something you all need to know." Then I moved to the body of the email. I thought about what to write. I could have filled it with 5 years of rage and accusations. I could have detailed every single lie, every single betrayal. But I realized that would only give them something to argue with. They could dismiss my words as hysteria. But they couldn't dismiss proof. So, I kept it simple. Devastatingly simple. I wrote, "Attached are an audio recording and a video clip from my evening. Mark paid me a visit. I have nothing more to say." That was it. I attached the 2 files. I watched the progress bars fill up as the files uploaded to the server. audio_confession.mp3, video_visitor.mp4. Each one felt like loading a shell into a cannon. When they were both attached, I took a deep, steadying breath. My hand was on the mouse, the cursor hovering over the blue send button. This was it. There was no going back from this. This was the point of no return. I was about to set fire to the last remaining, rotting bridges that connected me to the people who were supposed to be my family. And I felt nothing but a profound sense of relief. I clicked the button. The email vanished from my outbox. The bomb was in the air. Now, I just had to wait for the explosion. I didn't have to wait long. Less than an hour after I sent the email, my phone began to vibrate violently on my desk. It was my mother. I stared at her name on the screen, feeling a strange sense of detachment. I silenced the call. A minute later, it rang again. My father this time. I silenced that one too. Then came a barrage of text messages, a chaotic jumble of question marks, angry accusations, and desperate pleas to call me right now. I read none of them. I put my phone on Do Not Disturb and went to bed. For the first time in a week, I slept soundly. The real story of the fallout didn't come from them. It came 2 days later, from a number I hadn't seen in 5 years. It was an old friend, Susan. She had been a mutual friend of Mark's and mine, and one of the first to quietly ghost me after the divorce. My first instinct was to ignore it, but something made me answer. "Hello?" I said, cautiously. "Clara?" "Oh my God, Clara, it's Susan. I am so sorry." Her voice was thick with emotion. She was crying. I was stunned into silence. "I had to call," she sobbed. Your mom called my mom, you know how small towns are, and she told her everything, about Mark showing up, about the recording. Clara, I am so ashamed. For 5 years I believed the story he and Chloe told. We all did. What story? I asked, my voice barely a whisper, even though I already knew. That you'd had some kind of breakdown, she said, her voice full of regret. That you were paranoid and controlling, that your promotion had gone to your head, and that you drove him away. He made it sound like he and Chloe just comforted each other. We were idiots. We were such horrible friends to you. Can you ever forgive me? Hearing her confirm my worst fears, hearing that they had so systematically poisoned everyone against me, should have hurt. But it didn't. All I felt was a quiet, cold sense of validation. I wasn't crazy. It really had been that bad. There's nothing to forgive, Susan, I said, and I meant it. You were lied to. We talked for almost an hour. She filled me in on the chaos that had erupted in my hometown. The bomb I had sent had detonated spectacular fashion. Apparently, my parents had listened to the recording and immediately called Chloe, who had no idea Mark had even left town. When they confronted her with Mark's words, that he felt trapped, that she was just a kid, she had a complete meltdown. Mark arrived back home to a war zone. According to Susan, the story got even uglier from there. In the screaming match that followed, a paranoid Mark, now convinced of her immaturity, accused Chloe of cheating on him and demanded a paternity test for the baby. And here was the karmic twist I never saw coming. Backed into a corner, Chloe broke down and confessed. It turned out she had been cheating on Mark for the past 6 months with a guy her own age from town. Her pathetic excuse was that Mark was old and boring and she needed someone who understood her. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. The woman who had built her life on an affair was brought down by an affair of her own. The fallout was total. Chloe and Mark were in the middle of a nasty divorce. Susan said they were already fighting about potential custody arrangements and child support, which was now complicated by Chloe's infidelity. My parents were horrified, not just by the betrayal, but by the public humiliation of it all. Their perfect family was a laughingstock. My mother, in her shame and fury, had been calling everyone she could think of to spin the story, trying to paint Chloe as the victim of a manipulative older man, which is how Susan's mother had heard about it. But the damage was done. The truth, in all its ugly glory, was out. After I hung up with Susan, I felt quiet. There was no sense of triumph, no desire to dance on the graves of their relationships. The overwhelming feeling was one of profound, echoing emptiness. It was finally, truly over. The lies had been exposed. The toxic edifice they had built had crumbled to dust. I had been vindicated, but it was a hollow victory. I walked over to my window and looked out at the Austin skyline. The city lights twinkled, oblivious to the small-town drama that had consumed my life. For 5 years, I had been a character in their sordid story, the crazy ex-wife. But now, the story was over. The book was closed. And for the first time, I was free to write my own. 6 months later, you wouldn't have recognized my life. Or maybe, you would have recognized it as the life I was always meant to have before it was so violently derailed. The biggest change was the silence. It was no longer a heavy, lonely silence, but a peaceful, chosen one. After the implosion, I had made a final, decisive move. I had opened my phone, gone to my contacts, and one by one, I deleted them. Mom. Dad. Chloe. The act was small, but the feeling of liberation was immense. Then, I blocked their numbers for good measure. I wasn't angry anymore. I just knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that my peace required their absence. I had also started seeing a therapist, a kind, insightful woman named Dr. Evans. In our weekly sessions, I untangled the knots of grief, betrayal, and misplaced guilt that had been choking me for years. The real breakthrough came during one session in late spring. I was talking about my failed IVF attempts, the deep, aching desire for a child. I just feel like such a failure, I confessed, the old shame bubbling up. My sister, who betrayed me, gets pregnant by accident. And I, who have tried so hard to do everything right, can't. Dr. Evans looked at me gently. Clara, she said. I want you to consider something. Whose approval are you really seeking with a baby? The question stopped me in my tracks. I thought about it, really thought about it, and the truth was ugly and liberating all at once. For years, my drive to have a child was tangled up with my parents. It was a way to prove that I wasn't broken. It was a way to win the unspoken competition my mother had created between her daughters. It was a way to finally get the approval they had so freely given to my sister. Realizing that was like a key turning in a lock I didn't even know existed. My desire for a child was real, but it was buried under layers of pain and expectation. A month later, I decided to try one last time. I had some money saved from work, and my new promotion had given me a significant salary boost. I walked into the fertility clinic feeling different. This time, it wasn't for them. It wasn't to prove a point or win a prize. This time, it was just for me. For the quiet, happy life I was building for myself, on my own terms. I went through the process feeling calm and centered, detached from the outcome in a way I'd never been before. 2 weeks ago, on a Tuesday morning, the same day of the week Mark had started his barrage of texts all those months ago, my phone rang. It was the clinic. I took a deep breath and answered. The nurse's voice on the other end was bright and cheerful. Clara, she said. I have some wonderful news for you. The test was positive. I sat there on my couch, the phone pressed to my ear, as tears streamed down my face. But for the first time in a very long time, they weren't tears of pain or anger or grief. They were tears of pure, unadulterated joy. My life isn't perfect. I still have days where the ghosts of the past feel a little too close. But the peace I have now is real. It's a peace I built myself, from the ashes of a life that was burned to the ground. And soon, this quiet little apartment won't be so quiet anymore. It's going to be filled with the sounds of a new life, a new beginning. A family of my very own, built on a foundation of strength, resilience, and a whole lot of love. And that is a future worth fighting for. Thank you so much for listening to my entire story. It means the world to me to finally share it. I have a question for all of you. Has anyone else ever had to make the difficult decision to cut off family in order to find their own peace? Please let me know your experience in the comments below. And if my story resonated with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more.